Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pocket Perspectives podcast. It feels like a million years since I said that, but I'm back, your host, Tanisha. A few things have changed since season 3. We've had, I think, a 2-month break, and I've missed the podcast so much. Quite a lot has changed in the past 2 months, so I'm just dropping in quickly before we commence with the actual podcast today, just to kind of give you a bit of an update. So, first thing that's changed is my name. I got married. So exciting. I'll pop a few pictures in an overlay now, just so you can see how amazing the day was. But yeah, I am no longer Tinisha Osu. I am now Tinisha Graham. So we'll have to update all our artwork and things like that. So just in case you see that and wonder, who's this new person? Don't worry, it's still me. And just another note, we are currently solo hosting this. We still have amazing guests on, and I might have Toffee here, my dog. Say hi, Toffee, who it definitely needs a haircut. Looking a bit like a pot noodle right now. But yeah, essentially I am solo hosting for the foreseeable future. I did mention it briefly in last episode, but I didn't want to just kind of start off with a brand new season, not address it. But yeah, so Jack no longer works for IE Hub anymore. And so we had some amazing episodes with him, and we absolutely loved the podcast both of us did. But he's moved on to different things now. So yeah, I hope you don't mind, but it's just going to be me for the foreseeable, like I said. That could potentially change at some point. But yeah, just want to give you guys an update. Today we have an amazing episode. And I know I do say this about every single guest we have on, but I thought it was such a lovely episode to kick back off the season 4 with. So we have Claire Donovan coming on. She is from End Furniture Poverty. I really went into this episode with kind of very limited knowledge, and you might think that was a bit lazy of me or like just a bit unprofessional, but I truly wanted to kind of sit and learn with you guys. So I wanted to go in and kind of without much prior knowledge, which I don't think a lot of people have. I mean, that I could be wrong, I could be one of the minority, but I just didn't really know much about furniture poverty at all. So I wanted to kind of sit back, ask Claire some questions, have a good chat, and hopefully learn a thing or two along with you. So I'm so excited for this episode, and I hope you are too. So without further ado, let's get in with the episode. Claire, thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Of course, of course. So to dive straight in, I thought if you could first kind of define what furniture poverty is and kind of how it manifests in people's lives, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So our definition of furniture poverty is the inability to afford or access an essential item of furniture, appliance, or furnishings such as floor or window coverings. So the essential items for us are the sorts of things you'd expect. So a bed, a cooker, a fridge freezer, a washing machine, floor coverings, blinds or curtains. And you might not be able to necessarily afford it, but you might be able to access it. You might be in a furnished property, for example. You might be able to access it through family and friends. But if you're not able to do that, you can end up living without, which obviously has a terrible impact on your physical health, your mental health, but also your financial well-being. You might get into high cost credit or even doorstep lenders to try to buy the items, but also your social well-being. People can end up getting very isolated because sadly there's a real stigma attached to furniture poverty. So you'd be less likely to invite someone into your home if you don't have a sofa for them to sit on, for example. So it's very much hidden behind front doors. So it's a real hidden problem, but a very widespread one.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that I think I mentioned to you that I don't really know personally like a lot about it, and that's why I kind of did enough research to be able to formulate some questions and stuff. But I'm like kind of excited to sit and learn as well, like with the listeners who I think potentially might not even know what furniture poverty is. So thank you for that. We have previously had Fuel Bank Foundation on, and they've discussed fuel poverty with us. And I think food poverty, like FOOD, because they sound the same with my accent, fuel and food, I think is more kind of spoken about with the likes of food banks, so people are a bit more aware of what that is. So how would you say furniture poverty kind of interacts and intersects with those other forms of kind of like deprivation, like fuel and food poverty?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's about poverty at the end of the day. It's about people not having enough money to meet their essential needs. And understandably, food and fuel sort of top the hierarchy, if you like. They are, it's life-threatening to be without those things. Furniture poverty very much comes third for us. I think the impact on somebody's life, if you haven't got somewhere comfortable or safe to sleep, if you haven't got somewhere safe to store fresh food, somewhere to prepare and cook fresh food like a cooker, if you're not able to wash your clothes, homes without flooring are much colder. It can be unsafe if you're elderly or have a disability, or if you've got small children. And things like, if you're someone who has perhaps fled domestic abuse and you're moved into a property with no window coverings, you can feel incredibly exposed and unsafe, but also there's that insulation property that window coverings offer as well. So I think that, when you consider that furniture and appliances are likely to be some of the most expensive items that someone on a low income will need to acquire, it's not surprising to know that at least 9% of the population live in furniture poverty and are affected by it. And if you think, at the end of work today, we'll go home, we'll open our front door, we'll perhaps go and get some milk out the fridge. We might go and, cook a meal, go and sit on the settee, go and hang our clothes up in the wardrobe. It's a really grim existence if you don't have any of those very, very essential items.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'm like very working class, like I come from a very working class family. But even like listen to kind of yourself and other people who come on from like similar organizations, you realize how much you can take for granted of just kind of daily things that you just have accessible to you that not a lot of people do. So I think it's really important to have these conversations.
Absolutely. We often find with furniture poverty, there's, I always call it a light bulb moment when you talk to people and they go, oh, yeah, of course. Oh, I hadn't
Yeah,
thought of that. If a cooker costs £300, if you can't afford food, how on earth are you going to be able to replace your cooker when it breaks? So,
exactly.
it is something that affects lots of people. And, we've all started out in our own home for the first time and had to acquire the items that we've needed. But I think that given all of the challenges of recent years with austerity and Brexit and then the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, support is much harder to access now. And because a lot of support focuses on food and fuel, understandably so, the support that's available for people for furniture and appliances is really, really limited. So it's very much a growing problem.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned earlier about kind of people can sometimes obviously rely on credit for things like that. And with IE Hub, we speak to a lot of people who are kind of in a similar situation where they don't have a lot of money and they're worried about like paying the creditors and things like that. And when I've spoke to a lot of them, they've said, it started because I used a buy now pay later, or I put something on credit and it's kind of spiraled, and I just thought, oh, it's a future me problem. But then it's kind of hindsight, and now you're like trapped almost because you've just kind of spiraled in that debt. So do you see that a lot of kind of like people fall into debt because of trying to buy furniture?
Absolutely. And I think, you've got sort of different sort of classes. We see furniture poverty as very much as a continuum. So you've got millions of people in what we call furniture insecurity. So they've got everything they
Mm,
need for now, but if something breaks or needs replacing, they won't be able to afford to do so, and they'll move into furniture poverty. Now, some people can't access any form of credit because their credit rating is not good enough. But unfortunately, there are unscrupulous lenders out there who will lend people money, and then that gets them into a very, very difficult situation. But at the other end of the scale, furniture destitution, where someone has few or none of the essential items, if someone moves into a completely empty property, then trying to get the credit, trying to access the help you need to furnish an entire property is, a really insurmountable mountain to climb. So yeah,
hmm
people can get themselves into very, very difficult situations, or they simply live without the essentials that we all take for granted.
Yeah, 100%. And that must be so hard, not just for adults, but especially if they've got kids, because they feel like, oh, I've got kids, I have to provide for these. And
Yeah.
then it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
it's just horrible
Yeah, I
cycle.
mean, there's getting close to 1 million children in the UK who haven't got their own bed to sleep in. They're not all sleeping on the floor. They might be sharing with siblings. They could be sharing with parents and other family members. They could be sleeping on mattresses on the floor. But, you know, a bed for a child is so important as somewhere that's safe and secure for them to get a good night's sleep, for them to function in school, for them to not get ratty in school because they're tired, and then that disrupts other children's learning. You know, this is their future life chances that we're talking about here. But I think it affects, you know, so many of the essential items. I was talking to a mom who said, you know, I'm leaning over the bath trying to wash my children's clothes, and I feel like I failed as a mother because, you know, this is how I'm having to wash their clothes. Not to mention, as I've said, you know, being able to take advantage of supermarket offers and, you know, bulk buy food to put in the freezer, or batch cooking, or, you know, there's a real poverty premium attached to furniture poverty as well. You know, it actually costs more money to live without items, having to use a laundrette, having to rely on microwave meals or takeaways. So yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, and are there any other kind of long-term consequences for families and individuals who do live without? Obviously, you mentioned a few, but are there any other that you can think of?
Well, I think, you know, as I've said, you know, obviously the financial implications. If you get in debt, that can leave you unable to pay for food. That can leave you unable to pay your rent, which leads to rental arrears, which could lead to eviction. So you can lose your home. I think the impact on your mental health, that mum I mentioned, having to hand wash clothes over the side of the bath, it's a real grinding pressure on your day-to-day life, because our homes should be our sanctuaries. And if you haven't got that, the impact on your mental health is significant. That sort of social isolation and that stigma, it's not just about not inviting family and friends into your home, which is terrible in itself, but also being unwilling to invite support into your home. It could be a health visitor or a social worker or a housing officer, because you don't want them to see what's lacking in your home. So that cuts you off from vital sources of support as well. So I think, you know, it affects pretty much every area of your life.
Yeah, 100%. And then kind of speaking about now End Furniture Poverty, which is the organisation that you work for, if you could kind of introduce what they do, how they try and help people, kind of what your role is within that, and just kind of
Yeah,
summarise
sure.
that.
Sure. So End Furniture Poverty is the campaigning arm of a much bigger group of charities called FRC Group, founded in Liverpool over 35 years ago. And the group started basically taking furniture that people didn't want anymore and getting it to people who desperately needed it. So we still have a furniture reuse operation, Bulky Bobs. We've got the world's first mattress cleaning machine. I'm a trustee of the Reuse Network, which is the membership body for furniture reuse charities. So we do quite a bit of work in the reuse sector. We've also got FRC Furniture Resource Centre, which sells new furniture to local authorities and social landlords across the whole of the UK. 100% not-for-profit. All of that surplus is used to fund our charitable work. And we created End Furniture Poverty in 2015 because we realised there was only so much we could do ourselves. We needed others to be aware that furniture poverty is an issue, what it was, what it means for families and individuals, but also to carry out research and look at scale solutions, look at how we can help to change people's lives. So my background is journalism. I used to be a journalist. I came to do some communications work for FRC, and I became head of policy research and campaigns, heading up End Furniture Poverty a few years ago.
Wow, it must be such a rewarding job, because even I feel rewarded, and I work in marketing, but like kind of for a company does help people. So working within that sector and getting to see kind of how your company's helping must be like so amazing to see.
It is. It's great to think that, you know, I don't think I could ever have done a job that I didn't feel was making a contribution or changing things for the better. I mean, that's not to say it doesn't get frustrating, because obviously we hear these heartrending stories every day of people who are living without, and, you know, there's a lot to do in the country at the moment. You know, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of deprivation, there's a lot of things that need changing. So, and I know that the many others in the sector struggle to deal with the fact that, you know, we can't change everything overnight and it takes time. But, you know, absolutely the fact that we are all pulling together to try to improve people's lives, to try to end furniture poverty is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in terms of how End Furniture Poverty has grown since the beginning, like you said, kind of how important do you think that evolution is? Like where when you look at it now compared to where it started, can you kind of like take me on that journey?
Yeah, so our group of charities as a whole, you know, I mean, it started out practically in somebody's shed, and it's grown and
Yeah.
grown and grown. We've just moved in June back to Speak, the area of Liverpool where we started. We've now got a massive warehouse. We've got a site in Oldham. We've got a site in North Tyneside. Turnover last year was 17 million. So we've grown and grown and grown as an organisation. In terms of what End Furniture Poverty does, when I took over, I knew that in order to sort of argue the case for the change that we wanted, we needed robust evidence. We needed really solid data to make our arguments and to demonstrate the value of what we were saying. So that's what we've really focused on, is making sure that, you know, we produce really credible research reports that has facts and figures in there that are indisputable to really hammer home the extent of the problem and the impact. I think one of the things we look at more and more, especially with so many pressures on the public purse, is not only is ending furniture poverty the right thing to do, it's also the right, you know, there's a very strong economic argument for doing something about it. It's not that we can't afford to end furniture poverty, we can't afford not to. All of those issues I mentioned before on people's health and well-being has obviously a cost to the NHS, has a cost to social care, people getting evicted, and that cost for local authorities for temporary accommodation. So yeah, it's that there's a very strong sort of fiscal argument. But I think for us, it's been about ensuring that we really prove our case and construct really solid arguments for the change that we want.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And why do you think it is that potentially furniture poverty is sometimes overlooked when you compare it to maybe like food or fuel?
I think there were different reasons. I think because, as I've said, there are so many issues at the moment, it's hard to have the headspace to think of all of them. I think also we found, and I think this has changed in recent years, but a few years ago, you know, we do articles and what have you with national papers, and you look at some of the comments underneath, and people remember when they started out. They remember when they got their first flat or their first home and it was empty and they had to go out and acquire the items. Well, I managed it. Why can't other people manage it? And I think it's about ensuring that people recognise that times have changed. Rents are an awful lot higher than they were now. Far more of your income is gone before you've even started. So trying to buy furniture and appliances is really difficult. I think that, you know, the cost of furniture was massively affected by inflation along with everything else. The cost has gone up over 40% over the last 4 years. Over the last few years. And, you know, again, the fact that other sources of support are much harder to access. So I think, you know, but I think post-COVID, when people realised actually tough times can happen to any of us, that we found a much more sort of receptive and sympathetic audience, that people thought, God, yeah, this must be really hard for a family, for a woman who's fled domestic abuse with children and then is moved into a completely unfurnished social property, who's suffered trauma and PTSD with those children, and then where on earth does she start to create the home that they desperately need? So yeah, I think things have changed.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it was when we had Fuel Bank Foundation on, something that stuck into my head was he said that a lot of times he'd go to someone's house and they might not be able to afford to put electricity on or the gas, but then the garden would be the most beautiful garden in the front, and like they would look like like the house is like amazing, but then you go behind the door and it's like freezing. And he said a lot of the times, because like you said at the start, it's behind that closed door, so it's almost like you're not going to see it unless you live in it, I think.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, there's some, so we do a lot of work with the social housing sector, with social landlords, and you know, we've spoke to landlords who've said that oh, you know, we don't need to, you know, we've already got some help in place for our tenants. And then once they actually go out and start visiting and go inside those homes, they realise that the help they're offering is wholly inadequate and isn't really touching the size in terms of the extent of the problem. So, you know, I've spoken to organisations like, you know, energy companies like OVO and Octopus, who say they're sent into properties to install these great energy efficient boilers, and then they realise they've got concrete floors and nothing up at the windows. So the boilers, yes, very important, but, you know, goodness me, there are absolutely other things that need to be done. So, yeah, it's very much a hidden problem.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. And do you have kind of any stories? I know you mentioned about the woman with like a kind of a bathtub and stuff, but anything whilst you've been campaigning that kind of shows how harsh and how real the furniture poverty is?
No, absolutely. I mean, we get emails, although, you know, the End Furniture Poverty team here is very small, and we're primarily here to carry out research and to campaign, but we do still get emails from people asking for help. And, you know, just some of the emails I've had in the last week. I'm currently living in a hotel after being in a woman's refuge for over a year. I've been offered a property but don't have any furniture or white goods, as I had to leave them behind when I fled with my young daughter. Where can I get help? These are really, really regular stories. We get, emails from people who are in, who've got terminal illnesses, who desperately need a bed. How can I get some white goods? I've got severe mental health conditions, also have learning difficulties. I'm also not on the highest of incomes, although I am in receipt of PIP, it only goes so far. I've lived at my flat now for over a year and I haven't been able to save or afford any appliances. So, people can end up living without items for such a long time. This one, and this was actually from a housing association. I have a young tenant who's a single mother moving into one of her properties. The tenant is having great difficulty sourcing carpet for her property. This is important as her child is just starting to walk. The tenant is also looking for white goods such as a fridge, freezer, washing machine, etc. So, it's very, very regular. I think, we've got record numbers of people living in temporary accommodation. When someone ends up in temporary accommodation, very rarely can they take any furniture that they might have with them. So when they're lucky enough to come out the other side and to move into a property, if there's no furniture in it, it's incredibly difficult. And our research has shown that only 2% of social housing properties are made available as furnished, compared to 29% in the private rental sector. So the housing that's there to home our most vulnerable citizens, 98% of the time someone will move in and it will be completely bare. And that includes no flooring and no window coverings, as well as no furniture and no cooker and no fridge freezer. And so it is really, really difficult. So we get heart-rending stories absolutely every day. And it's very, very difficult to tell people where they might be able to get help from.
No, I can imagine. And I was wondering, like, for you personally, how do you kind of separate, or do you separate, like, kind of like work from home? Like, do you take that home with you? Because I think I'd be so emotionally involved. Like, I'd go home and be thinking about these emails that I got today. So I do deal with
I
it.
think it is difficult knowing that I'm lucky enough to go home to a furnished home, and many people aren't. It does inspire us and give us the passion to carry on fighting and carry on doing what we do. I think there's this sort of two ways of helping people. There's trying to help each individual family, or there's looking at that whole scale, widespread change that can actually help millions of people. So it's the campaigning work that we do that we hope will change things to lift millions out of furniture poverty. It gives us that drive to carry on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. And do you have kind of any stories about how end furniture poverty has helped someone kind of on the other side, maybe a more positive outlook on it?
I do. So these are some quotes from some tenants from a housing association that we worked with over a number of years to help them to put a furniture scheme in place and to provide furniture for their tenants. And I'll talk more in a bit about how that can work. But their furnished tenancy scheme started in January. And we've got some quotes here. So having a furnished tenancy has really helped me to settle into my new home. Having been on the street, homeless, I only had a small bag of clothes. Being able to move right into the flat with everything ready for me helped me to feel less anxious. Of all the items in the furnished tenancy, the washing machine has been great, as I can now do my washing when needed. Being homeless, this was almost impossible to do. And then someone else said, I felt I would not have been able to maintain a tenancy if I hadn't had the option of a furnished property to give me a head start. Someone called it a lifesaver. Getting a furnished housing was a godsend. It took away all the hassle of moving into a council property, as everything I needed was there. And I really benefited from a furnished tenancy agreement, as it gave me the essentials to live comfortably without worrying about money. And, it's about setting people up in a home. It's about giving people the best start in a home, so they're more likely to be able to sustain that tenancy, to remain in it, and then to start potentially looking at other areas of their life where they might need to make some changes and to move forward. And, I've mentioned obviously furnished tenancies. The way a furnished tenancy works is where the cost of furniture is added onto the service charge, which is covered by universal credit. So it's not right for every tenant. It's right for tenants who are on benefits and likely to be on benefits for a little while. It's a group of tenants who particularly need help. And the way that landlords can access furniture now, they can rent it, for example, which means they don't need to have any money. The housing associations have told us in the past that we can't afford to do a furnished tenancy scheme. Well, that's not true anymore, because you can just rent the furniture. And then should a tenant's circumstances change and they move into employment and off benefits, they can just return the furniture and get the service charge removed. So, but what we have found from landlords who do this is that actually giving tenants the home and the furnished property that they need, they're far more likely to move off benefits, because they are, you know, in a much better place physically and emotionally to start looking at moving forward with their lives. So we find it makes a huge difference, and a really important one, and that's, you know, a key campaigning area for us.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of comes full circle, kind of what you were speaking about, how it kind of has ripple effects and costs on kind of the society of the UK in general. So if someone's more likely to come off benefits because of that, then it's obviously a positive, it's a good thing.
It is, absolutely. I mean, we're currently calling for at least 10% of social homes to be made available as furnished. So at the moment, it's only 2%. We think it should be at least 10%, and that's based on the fact that we know that at least 26% of social housing tenants live in furniture poverty, live without one or more item, which that's against 9% of the population. So it's a far higher proportion of people in social housing, which to a certain extent you'd expect, because again, it's housing that's there for our more vulnerable citizens. But also 8% of social housing tenants are living in what we call deep furniture poverty. So they're living without 3 or more essential items. So looking at that 2% that currently exists of furnished properties, the fact that 8% of tenants are in deep furniture poverty, that's given us that 10%. But also we know landlords who do provide furnished tenancies, it's naturally balanced at about 10% of their stock. So we think that reflects the need that's out there, and is a really good starting point. And that would free up other types of support for people who aren't on benefits. So if it will free up the charity support and other support the landlord might offer, and local authority support, if that particular group has already been catered for and already been looked after. Now, that does have a significant cost to the government, because if 8% more people are claiming for furniture through the service charge, you know, we're looking at getting on close to £500 million a year to cover that extra service charge. But as I've said, we like to do our research. We like to make sure we've got the data to back up what we're saying. So we're doing a cost benefit analysis study at the moment to get the figures on, if people are provided with furniture, how much does that save the public purse? Or conversely, if they're not provided furniture, how much does that cost the public purse? So we believe we'll be able to say, yes, this will cost nearly 500 million, but if you do this, you'll save X amount, haven't got the figures yet, more than 500 million across a whole range of budget headings. Plus, it's absolutely the right thing to do. We've got the 6th largest economy in the world, and we've got children sleeping on the floor. We've got families who can't cook food. You know, it's not right. It's not right at all.
No, and like it's important to look at the long term, like you said, like short term might cost that amount, but you got to look at it like that. So yeah, completely agree. So that's an amazing story, thinking about like landlords and social housing. But do you have any other kind of stories about where you work with other policy makers to kind of address the wider issue as well?
Yeah, I think there are the 2 main areas that we're focusing on this year are that furniture provision and social housing, but also local authority crisis support. So this is, they're called different things by different local authorities, but it's often called something like local welfare provision or local welfare assistance, and it's schemes provided by local authorities to help people in a time of great need. So it could be support with food, it could be support with fuel, but usually around 38% of spend goes on furniture and appliances. So every year for the past 5 years, we issue freedom of information requests to every local authority to find out, do they have a scheme? How much do they spend? How many applications do they get? How much of it goes on furniture and appliances? And, you know, we've found it's a really difficult picture out there. So in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, they have centrally run schemes. So wherever you live in those countries, you can access support. In England, it's down to each local authority whether they run a scheme or not. And our latest report found that 36 out of the 153 local authorities because it's the upper tier ones, it's things like county councils as opposed to district councils. 36 of them don't have a scheme. They don't offer that type of support. And then a further 2 have a scheme, but they don't provide help with furniture and appliances. It's got a bit complicated in the last couple of years because we had the Household Support Fund as well, which was given to local authorities. But again, our research found that actually about 40% of that went on vouchers for families in receipt of free school meals to cover the school holiday period, which is absolutely important, but it's not a crisis. They should be supported enough to not need that. And actually very little of the Household Support Fund went on furniture and appliances. But having that really solid data, which the DWP didn't have, we've shared that with the DWP. We've used that as part of the sort of evidence base to argue for the Household Support Fund to be extended. And now we're using it to say, right, we need a long-term future for crisis support. We need to make sure that every local authority offers and provides crisis support, but they need the money to do it. Local authorities are really struggling. And we need crisis support to be made a statutory service, so every local authority has to provide it, because at the moment it's not. So if a local authority gets into financial trouble, like Birmingham, for example, and they have to issue what's called a Section 114 notice, that means they have to stop spending on all non-statutory services, which means they have to stop giving, so even if they had a local welfare scheme, they have to stop providing a local welfare scheme. Now, for now, they've been able to continue some support through the Household Support Fund, but we think it's far too fragile a situation. It has to be made statutory, and local authorities need to get proper money from the government to deliver that support. And unfortunately, over recent years, yes, there was funding, which was great, but it was really hand to mouth. It was announced days before the last tranche was due to end. Local authorities had no time to plan, no time to sort of strategically look to the future and say, right, how can we spend this money to tackle the root causes of poverty, to really help to lift people out of poverty, rather than just a sticking plaster of giving more food vouchers or giving more fuel vouchers, or, you know, how can we look at helping people's lives change so they don't fall into crisis. Now, there'll always be a need for a crisis fund. We've had that type of support since the 1930s in this country. Families can always find themselves in terrible situations where, you know, the wage earner dies, or, you know, something terrible happens in a family. So we will always need crisis support, but having long-term funding, which we obviously very much hope that the current government will be able to offer, will mean that local authorities can plan ahead. So, you know, we're really campaigning and fighting hard on that at the moment. Our last set of data was shared with the Department for Work and Pensions and government ministers, and we like to think it played a part in getting the Household Support Fund extended again at the beginning of September. So it's been extended to the end of March. We're working with other charities like the Children's Society and the Local Government Association and Trussell Trust to carry out an inquiry asking local authorities what they think the future of crisis support should look like, and asking other voluntary organisations and charities, etc., to ask them what they think the future of crisis support should look like. And we will also be asking people who've been in a time of crisis, what do they think it should look like? Put all that together and give it to the government and say, right, this is what, you know, the consensus is across all these key stakeholders. This is what it should look like. This is how much we believe you should be investing in it. And then our cost benefit analysis study, we've done one on furnished tenancies, we're also doing one on local welfare. We'll be able to say, this is how much you should be investing, but this is how much it's going to save you. And we already know from the figures on that, for every £1 invested in local welfare, at the moment it's looking like it's over £7 return. So it's a really good return, you know. If you want to invest your money wisely, local welfare should be the place the government does it. So you know, that's another key part of our campaigning work. And, you know, we continue to do work with the reuse sector through my role with the reuse network, looking at things like regional reuse hubs. The network at the moment is looking at how we can look at the sort of regulation that's imposed on furniture reuse and ensuring that it's measured and sensible, and it doesn't go too far and it doesn't hinder the reuse of furniture, because obviously, as well as poverty, we've also got a climate emergency that we can't ignore. We need to get better at reusing items. We need to stop seeing it all as waste and a problem, and seeing some of it as a commodity that we can actually use to tackle a problem. So that's something that we also look at as well.
Okay, and obviously the October budget is coming up soon. Do you we've been told that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Are you kind of that belief, like, or do you think that what they're going to announce, whatever it is going to kind of hit like the lowest income people like the hardest, and people who are in that kind of poverty?
I hope not. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. And to be honest, having attended the Labour Party conference last week, I don't think a lot of MPs know. I think it's sort of kept very much within Treasury circles and obviously the Prime Minister's office as to what will be in the budget. There's no denying that some very tough decisions, and decisions that perhaps we didn't all agree with, were made over the past sort of decade, that have left many of our public services on their knees and really struggling, you know, coupled with those impacts earlier around things like Brexit and COVID, and obviously, you know, cost of living, which was impacted by the war in Ukraine, but there were other decisions that were made that made the situation even harder. So, you know, we have to make sensible decisions. I understand that, but I'm firmly of the belief that the broadest shoulders should bear the lion's share of the burden, and people on low incomes, they don't have anywhere to go. You know, anyone who had any savings has gone through it now. You know, people don't have any buffers left anymore. So, you know, many support is really struggling to survive and continue to provide any kind of meaningful support. So I very much hope that is acknowledged and recognised, and that longer term view needs to be taken.
Yeah.
Because you know, slash and burn of public services, the long-term costs and consequences of that are immense. So cuts to things like, you know, public health and to education, and, you know, leaves people less able to move into better employment and earn money and pay taxes and have a decent life in the long term. Those sort of long-term life chances, the long-term health implications, you know, it will cost us so much more as a society if we don't invest now. So I very much hope that will be the case. You know, local authorities need to have sufficient funding to be able to provide things like local welfare. We need you know, we need to ensure that, you know, things like social housing, but there is an awful lot to do. I'm very conscious of that, but, you know, I hope that the budget recognises where the burden should fall.
Yeah, I hope so too. I guess we'll see. So in terms of kind of what we can do, so once I knew that we were doing this podcast, we're actually having a bit of a clear out because we've recently moved, and there was a desk that I was like going to put on Facebook Marketplace, and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to put it on Olio. Someone can take it for free. Hopefully, someone maybe with children who need a desk for the room can use it and take it. So we've been doing that and trying to get rid of kind of like a lot of stuff that hopefully can help other people. Sorry, Amazon. So what if someone is in a similar situation? What would you recommend for them to do?
I think that furniture reuse, as I've said, is really, really important. I think that there are lots of different types of organisations and charities out there that do, you know, will reuse furniture. You've got charities like the British Heart Foundation, or you know, Bernardo's, all those types of shops which will have pre-loved furniture in there, but they're trying to sell it for as much as they can in order to raise money for another cause. Furniture reuse charities that are members of the Reuse Network have ending furniture poverty as part of their charitable mission. So some of them might give some furniture away to people in need, or they will sell it for as little as they can in order to ensure that people on the lowest incomes are able to afford it. Now, along with all of us, and along with lots of other organisations, a lot of furniture reuse charities have struggled in recent years as the costs have gone up, cost of energy, etc. So, you know, unfortunately, there are areas of the country now which aren't covered by that type of furniture charity. But if you go on the Reuse Network's website, if you just Google Reuse Network, you'll find it. There's a page in there to donate items. So if you put your postcode in, it will tell you which furniture reuse charities are nearby. and then you can see about donating your items to them. I think things like sort of free gull and free cycle are great. Unfortunately, transport is often an issue for the bigger items. So if someone's really struggling, they're not going to have a van, they're probably going to afford a van. So that is difficult. But I think, you know, getting in the mindset of reusing furniture is a really, really good thing. I mean, sometimes people can get a little bit annoyed that, you know, I've got a sofa, it's in perfectly good condition, it hasn't got a fire label on, why won't anyone take it? Well, it hasn't got a fire label on. If you cut the fire label off, unfortunately, it can't be reused legally. And that's what I was saying before about some of the legal consequences. And, you know, there's no point of furniture reuse charity coming to get something if they can't reuse it, and then they've got to cover the costs of disposing of it. So they can't always take everything, but definitely start with a furniture reuse charity. And I think that is really important. It's not gonna go anywhere near to solving our wider issues. On our website, we have a section, Make a House a Home. So this is our campaign for at least 10% of social homes to be provided as furnished. So there's a button on there where you can pledge your support, where you can just say, this is why I think this is a good idea. And the more people we have acknowledging and saying, there's lots of information on the campaign so people can have a read through and make sure, you know, obviously that they do agree with it. The more support we can gather, it makes our conversations with MPs and ministers and policymakers more powerful. There's also a page on there to get a template to write to your MP. I would also urge people to speak to their councillors. You know, speak to your councillors. Does your local authority offer a local welfare scheme? And as I've said, it's not town councils or district councils that offer local welfare. It's the upper tier, they're called. So it's city councils, county councils, metropolitan councils. And, you know, so speak to your councillors, write to your councillors. Do we offer a local welfare scheme as a council? If not, why not? You know, where are people supposed to go? So I think that there are you can do if you work for an organisation, perhaps you're someone who works for a social landlord. We provide lots of help for landlords. We've got a blueprint for furniture provision in social housing on our website, which is like a step-by-step guide for landlords to understand how furniture provision can work, what type of furniture to offer, how to set a service charge, etc. We provide one-to-one support for landlords. We can guide them and help them through. And then in the last year, we've actually worked with our colleagues in FRC, our sister charity, and we've set up a new furniture scheme to make it really easy for landlords to buy furniture or to rent furniture. It's called Furniture Flex, and it's been designed based on all the conversations I've had with landlords over the years. We couldn't do a furnished tenancy scheme because, we haven't got any money. Okay, you can rent it. It's a poverty trap. Tenants can return the furniture, so it's not. It's going to be really hard work. We haven't got the capacity or the staff. Well, first of all, you can put an admin charge on top to cover your staffing costs, but also we've worked really hard to put together a really enhanced type of support package. So it's really reduced the admin burden for landlords. And if there's anything else we haven't thought of, tell us and we'll see if we can introduce that as well. So if anyone works for a housing association or has connections with a housing association, send them our way. That would be good. And if you happen to be mates with your local MP or, you know, have any other influential friends, get in touch. And the more people we can talk to, the more doors that we can get through, that people can help to open for us, the more we can have these conversations and make our case for ending furniture poverty.
Yeah, I love that. And all the links I will list down below so people can go straight there, and hopefully we can get some people going there. So you've mentioned quite a few things, and just kind of as we come to a close in a little bit, what would success look like for end furniture poverty? Like you said, there's always going to need crisis support and things like that. But if you could define it, what would it look like, success for you?
I think as a starting point, I would like any social housing tenant to be able to access a furnished tenancy if they need one. I would like people wherever they live in the UK to be able to access crisis support from their local authority. I would like every local authority to look at what it does with its bulky household waste. So this is the collections that local authorities have to provide for bulky waste, which is usually furniture and appliances. Obviously, it can be other big items as well. Look at what they're doing with that. Is it all going to waste to energy? Is it all being thrown away? In which case, that's ridiculous and it really shouldn't happen anymore. Yes, it might cost a little bit more money in your waste budget, to look at reusing those furniture and appliances. But if you look at your budget as a local authority overall, it will definitely save you money, because people will be able to, if you reuse that furniture, and whether you do it yourself or work with a local reuse charity to reuse that furniture and to gift it to people, or even sell it at low cost to them, you'll be helping so many of your council taxpayers, you'll be helping so many of your residents, and stop them from needing help from your local welfare scheme, or getting into situations where they get evicted and then you have to pay them, provide them with temporary accommodation, etc. So it's having that sort of bigger picture approach. But I think, the main thing is that wherever you live, you should be able to access local welfare. And if you live in social housing, you should be able to access a furnished tenancy scheme if you need one. They're the absolute first things. Obviously, the longer term goal is to end furniture poverty. Obviously, as I've said, there will always be crisis situations, but as a whole, we don't want it to be such an issue that someone can move into a property with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I really hope that we get there. Something that I was thinking of recently is, like a lot of us will go downstairs and we'll see a pile of dishes, or we'll see like lots of laundry and that has to be done. You think, oh God, like we have to do this. But then I think, again, coming back to the gratitude thing, it's like, how fortunate am I that I have a dishwasher that I can throw my dishes in, or I have a washing machine that I can sort that laundry with. So I really hope that the listeners listen, even hopefully they could go onto the website and they like write all the letters, but hopefully they at least kind of think and take that gratitude if they do have those things as well. So I really
absolutely
hope
that. And I think if any of us have been in that situation where your washing machine's broken, and we're lucky enough to think, oh, I'll just have to replace it, but in that interim period, what a nightmare it is to get your clothes washed. If you need just imagine living like that all the time with no hope of getting those items. So yeah, absolutely, I drive my kids mad by saying but we are, yes, we've worked for these things, but we've not. People end up in circumstances absolutely not of their making, and it's absolutely right that we support them and help them. So yes, we are lucky, and we need to help others who aren't as lucky.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Claire. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we close off?
I don't think so. I think I've covered everything. I mean, something I always say, within reason, I never turn down a meeting. Always happy to have a conversation with someone. You never know where it's going to go to. So, if anyone wants to get in touch to find out more, or to have a chat about how their organisation might be able to help, do get in touch. Have a look at the Reuse Network's website, you should just get in touch if people want to find out more.
Amazing, thank you. Well, yeah, like I said, I'll link everything down below so people can find you easily. But thank you very much again for joining.
Thank you very much.
Brill. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Wow, what an amazing episode. I told you that it was going to be good, didn't I? I told you. Oh, so much to learn, so much to know, and I really hope that you were able to take a few things away today. And yeah, hopefully we can just carry on educating each other, keep learning, keep changing, and keep making the world a better place. So yeah, absolutely love today's episode. This is season 4. I hope you're enjoying it so far. We have so much coming up in the next few weeks. And I'm so excited to just bring you along on the journey. We have amazing guests coming on and a few other little surprises. So it's going to be such a fun journey. And as usual, we're on social media. So if you want to drop us a message, let us know how you're enjoying the podcast. It's just IE Hub on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And yeah, we absolutely love hearing from you guys. So please do drop us a message. And like I said at the start, I'm so excited to be back for season 4. Can't wait to see what the next few weeks brings. And yeah, I'm loving being back. So thanks for listening, guys. Bye.